Welcome everyone to our first Friday presentation of 2024. It's nice to see so many happy, cheerful people with us. We are going to have other First Friday presentations throughout the year. As I mentioned, February, and by the way, May also, we currently don't have anyone scheduled, but we have Tiffany, who is available, who's right to my right on the screen, going to present in March, and we have Sid, who's going to present in April. So we got a couple of people here seeing what's going on. So thank you both for that. I've known Hillary Webb, who is today's presenter, if we were trying to go over that before, for, gosh, at least 15 to 18 years. I met her at a AAA conference. She was, at the time, a doctoral student of Stan Krippner's, and learned a little bit about her work. And of course, anybody who Stan took under his wing, the bona fides were already there. And so her research became interesting automatically. She studied among shamans in South America, and most recently, at least that I'm aware of, did a book on stand-up comedy in Berlin. And having lived for many years in Germany myself, the whole idea of Germans doing stand-up was a very kind of a cultural or a cognitive dissonance thing there, but I guess it works. But anyway, I'm going to let Hillary take it from here. She's going to be talking about teaching consciousness at Goddard College, which I'm very excited to learn about myself because I don't know as much. So Hillary, you want to take it away? And we're going to take it away for discussion and questions when she's done.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all for coming and being present while I talk a little bit about my weird idea, which actually wasn't my weird idea, but all the beautiful, wonderful, weird ideas that happen at Goddard College. And yeah, I've been at Goddard. Well, let's see. I did my master's at Goddard back in 2006. I was in the IMA program with a focus in the consciousness studies concentration. And I always tell people that going to Goddard College for my master's degree was one of the best decisions I ever made. And hopefully by the time I'm done giving my presentation, you'll have an idea of what makes this place so special and what makes how we approach the study of consciousness sort of its own thing. And after I do my little spiel, which I don't know if that'll go for half an hour, I've got a bit of a PowerPoint presentation, then I've got a video to show you. I would love to, go around and hear all about your all interest and work and experience with consciousness studies, whether teaching it or as a student of it. And questions, obviously, about the doing of it at Goddard College. And I would also love any kind of advice or feedback as somebody, I've taken on the role of consciousness studies coordinator when I started teaching at Goddard in was it 2021? And I'm always looking for ways to grow the program, both internally and in terms of outreach to folks who would be interested in this kind of thing and would benefit from getting a master's degree like the one offered at Goddard. So I will go ahead.
Hillary, physically, yes. Where are you located?
So I'm in Maine right now. Goddard College, yes, Goddard College is in Vermont, in Plainfield, Vermont, and it's a low residency program, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means.
Okay.
All right. So let me share my screen. Share sound. Okay. And hopefully you can all see the first slide. It says Teaching Consciousness Studies at Goddard College. Good. Okay. I see a nod. Excellent.
Must be Goddard College. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is Goddard College. You can see in the foreground the labyrinth, which is probably the best shot of the college, is just seeing this labyrinth. And we will often have students during residencies taking very meditative walks around the labyrinth and around the campus. And it's a very beautiful and special place. And actually, if off to the right is a really interesting small, tiny shed of a building that has as one of its beams in the ceiling, a beam that was used actually in the Salem witch trials, or so they say. It was, I think it was used to hang people. So That's it's a little spooky and weird, but it's an interesting connection.
Uh,
All right. Oh, let's see if we can get this. Uh-oh. Hold on. I'm not sure why it's not letting me forward. Oh. Can everybody hear me okay? Now, John and I actually did test this. I don't know why it's not functioning. I can't seem to escape. So I'm going to stop the share and start again. This time, I think I'll do one at a time.
That'd just be too easy if everything went right the first time.
I'm telling you what, seriously. Now. Okay, hallelujah. Okay, whoops, why is it going back? All right, so a little bit about me, and John referred to some of this. So for the last, what are we at, like 24, 25 years, I've been an independent researcher, my focus being the anthropology of consciousness and theater studies. And that has meant a few things. I've spent the beginning of my research looking at shamanism, both in the modern world and in places in, or I should say, not the modern world, but in sort of neo-shamanic presentation, and also traditional shamanism in Peru. And of late, I've been looking at the intersection between consciousness studies and performance and theater. And what is currently, I'm looking at what is going on between us, between the audience and performers on the stage. So maybe next year I'll come back with some weird ideas about that. I'm a 2006 graduate of Goddard's Individualized Master's Program with a Consciousness Studies concentration, and a 2009 graduate of Saybrook University's PhD in Psychology program with a Consciousness Studies concentration there. And yes, John mentioned, I studied with Stan Krippner and Stephen Pritzker and Jürgen Kremer. So some of you may know them. From 2009 to 2012, I was the managing editor of the Anthropology of Consciousness journal. I did my postdoc research at the Monroe Institute, which is down in Virginia, and it looks at the intersection between consciousness and sound and how sound can create altered states of consciousness. And currently I am an adjunct faculty member and the Consciousness Studies concentration coordinator at Goddard. And if you want to know more about me and some of the writing I've done, books, articles, whatever, that's my website there. Feel free to check it out and contact me on the contact page with any questions at all. Okay. Again, it's not letting me move. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to do a real rapid fire overview of the history of Goddard College, in part because I think it's really helpful to just see the history behind it. As you can see from that first date, it was opened started in 1863. So it's got a very, very long history. So I think that's helpful to know that it's been in existence for as long as it has. Even more interesting to me is just as we'll go through it, I was talking before about what a special place Goddard is. And one of the special things about it is it's very nimble. It's very poised to shift gears as needed. It knows how to read the landscape and how to pivot as necessary to the needs of students, to the needs of the culture. And the consciousness studies concentration is part of that as well. So in 1863, Goddard College opened in Barre, Vermont, which is only probably 20 minutes from where it's located now. It was opened originally as the Green Mountain Central Institute, which is a 4-year preparatory high school. In 1870, it was renamed and rebranded as the Goddard Seminary. In 1935, there was a junior college program added. In 1936, it shifted from a seminary to a progressive education institution in a kind of John Dewey-esque educational democracy, which was basically, looking at traditional educational models as being very rigid, very strict, very, um, let's say, narrow in terms of what students were able to do and envision and the roles that they were allowed to play in their own education. So that was changed to really accentuate an ethos of individual attention, democracy, and informality. And that sort of ethos really, really is part of something that is very much true today at Goddard. We always say that Goddard is a student-centered educational model. So students come in, especially in the master's degree where I teach, and they have their own ideas about what they want to learn. They're not going to classes. They're coming in and saying, hey, I want to learn this, and I want to, bring in this and this. How do I do that? And that's sort of where I come in. And we'll get to more of that. Okay. In 1938, it was renamed Goddard College and moved to Plainfield, Vermont, which is 20 minutes, I think, south of Montpelier. In 1959, it was accredited. In 1963, it added the first low-residency adult degree program in the country, which operated as a mix of residential, low-residency, and distance learning programs. So I find that pretty exciting. I'm very proud of that for Goddard's sake, because that was really, way, way, way ahead of the curve in terms of like what can be done with and for students of all ages and students of all with all kinds of different needs. So, not just 20 to 30 somethings, let's say, you have people coming from every age who may have children, who may have another job. And Goddard has always been always been very important to Goddard to consider the students' life circumstance and how we can best bring education to them and allow them to use their life experience as part of their education. In 2002, the residential undergraduate degree program was terminated. I'm not entirely sure why. I think it just wasn't feasible anymore to kind of keep things going. I should probably find out the exact reasons for that. But and at that point, Goddard became an exclusively low residency college. So basically what low residency college means for us is that at the beginning of every semester, we have a week where all faculty and students come to campus and meet, we give workshops, we meet with, faculty advisors meet with our students and talk about what they plan to do for the rest of their semester, how they will show us their learning, whether that's in writing, whether that's in some sort of multimedia thing. And it's also a really nice way of coming to this beautiful campus and getting to know people. And I've made, but during my time at Goddard as a student, I made friendships that are lifelong. I'm still friends with people. And it's given that it's only a week, it's a tremendous bonding experience. Yeah. So in 2005 and 2011, the college expanded its geographic reach to include low residency programs in Port Townsend and Seattle, Washington. And those are mostly the writing programs, which I don't have any involvement with myself. All right. So in 2004, the consciousness studies concentration was put into place as part of the individualized master's degree program by Francis Charette, who was my predecessor in terms of the concentration coordinator. And, talking about nimbleness, Francis really made a pitch for bringing the study of consciousness into Goddard as a real sort of like focused discipline of study, because he really was seeing throughout the country, not just the United States, Canada as well, he's from Canada, that this whole subject area of consciousness studies was really booming, that there were people really looking for a way to explore all facets of consciousness studies. And when I show you the video, it'll talk a little bit about these various fields of study that kind of come all together to create the consciousness studies program at Goddard. Just to continue the chronology here, in 2013, 3 of the college's master's programs, Individualized Masters of Arts, Health Arts and Sciences, and Social Innovation and Sustainability, combined forces to create the umbrella program, the Goddard Graduate Institute. So prior to this, each of these 3 programs were kind of their own thing and had often their own residency programs and had to sort of, and their own faculty and sort of, they were brought together both partly because it just made sense because they were kind of catering to similar people. The faculty that we had were able to speak to each of these 3 things. So it was kind of like stronger together kind of thing. We felt like the program could be made even stronger if we to bring these 3 specialized programs into the same umbrella program that is the Goddard Graduate Institute. From 2020 to 2022, the residencies went virtual due to the pandemic. And this was kind of an amazing thing to watch. Our enrollment numbers went way up during the pandemic because, of course, people are stuck at home and they're like, hey, now's the perfect time to go back to school since I can't go to work or I can't do this, do that. And again, very proud of Goddard's nimbleness in that it was very easy to go from, we were practically online as it was, although we're now doing more Zoom conferences than we ever did before. But we pretty much did not miss a beat when the pandemic happened. And here we are. And then in 2022, once the pandemic was mostly lifted, the residencies became hybrid. So, and this has been an interesting thing as a faculty member to kind of learn how to navigate, because at this point, students are not required to be on campus for their residency. In previous years, you had to basically, to be a student, you had to show up for a week at the Goddard campus in Vermont. Now we're giving people the option of you can either go to the campus and have, the in-person experience, or if for some reason you cannot, you can do it as a sort of a hybrid thing. So we'll have the owls in the classrooms and, do people on the screen, people in the seats. And yeah, it's interesting. I mean, in some ways, I mourn the days where it was sort of like we all had to be on campus. Because there is sort of no substitute for that in the flesh experience. On the other hand, it's really a great thing for students who maybe have physical challenges, who can't, navigate the coming to the campus, or whose lifestyles, for whatever reason, maybe they can't afford the plane fare or, whatever. So like anything, it's been sort of an interesting good and bad situation. So we're still in a place where we're trying to figure out, okay, what is the best way to do this new era? Because the hybrid is not going anywhere. And so we're thinking about, okay, do we shorten the residencies and then have a lot more virtual online stuff during the semester? How do we want to work that? So, again, these are all questions. I would love any kind of feedback from any of you at the end if you have experience with these things. Part of my desire to do this talk is to, one, share my enthusiasm for Goddard as a whole and the consciousness studies program specifically, but also to get feedback from you all about ways of improving the program, of increasing enrollment, getting the word out there. So yeah, I'm absolutely open to all ideas. Very happy about it. So here's a couple more pictures. Does anybody have any questions so far that I could answer before I think the video's up next? I guess you can just shout out. I don't see any hands. So, all right, I will continue on. So yeah, anyway, here's another building. That's sort of the main building where most of the advising meetings happen. It's called the Community Center. And that's the clock tower in the right-hand picture with, I think that might have been a board meeting. Or maybe it was a college meeting. I recognize a few people. But anyway, that's some of the shining, smiling faces we get there. Okay, So I talked a little bit about this, but just to kind of give you an overview of how we do the master's degree and what this student center low residency kind of thing looks like. Um, it can be very confusing to talk to people about it because it is so unlike your classic traditional college model where students come into a room and there's a lecturer at the front talking and they're taking notes. So please do shout out if you have questions about any of this and if I'm explaining it in a way that makes it digestible. So Goddard Graduate Institute is a master's degree program, and it's typically 4 semesters or 2 years of a program. Now, it can also be 3 semesters if a student comes in with a lot of previous experience, whether that's at another college or whether that's sort of like lifetime experience, they can petition to come in as a 36 credit as opposed to a 48 credit student, in which case they would probably only take 3 semesters of it. There are other students who go, part-time, so it takes them maybe, 2.5 years or 3 years, depending on how part-time they do go. So it's very flexible again in terms of, we want to cater to everybody's particular lifestyle, life needs, that kind of thing. So students will come to campus either in person or virtually for a week at the start of each semester to create their study plan, and attend workshops and engage in community building. Now, the study plan is a document that they turn into us at the very end of the residency that says basically, here's who I am, here's what I'm interested in studying, here are the books and other media that I plan to look at, and here's what I will do for my packet 1, which is going to be due 3 weeks after we leave the residency. I'm going to write a 25-page paper on X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to use this source, and this source, and so on for 5 packets. We do have some flexibility. Again, we have some students with learning challenges who, instead of doing written papers, will do multimedia presentations, videos, things like that. Again, very flexible in terms of what students need and how they best, how they best intake and outtake information, and how they best show learning for themselves and just for us, so that we can check a few boxes here and there. One thing we also do at Goddard, and is important to be shown in the study plan, and this is one of my favorite things about Goddard, and I think one of the reasons I love Goddard so much, is that what I was called the holy trinity of a Goddard education is the knowing, the being, and the doing. So we really ask all students to hit each of these 3 things. So the knowing might be the intellectual book learning. What are the conversations going out in the world about your particular topic? Prove to us that you know the landscape, that, if you're at a party, you're able to talk with somebody who's in your field about the real, main points. So that's the knowing. The doing, or knowing, being. So being is, why is this important to you? How does this particular knowledge square, how does the intellectual knowledge square with your experiential knowledge? How does how does this affect your world and the people around you? What have you seen with your own 2 eyes and your sort of experiential lens? And then the doing is, we ask students, at least in the consciousness studies concentration, for example, students are asked to do a small kind of offering to their communities about their work. So that might be a workshop, that one person did a podcast, and that's a great way to take the work that they're doing out of the sort of womb of Goddard and present it to non-Goddard people, see if their ideas are, translating well for somebody who may not know about a particular subject, or even for people who do know about a particular subject. So in the study plan, we like to hit what's your knowing, what's your being, what's your doing. During the residency, students choose or are paired with individual faculty advisors with whom they correspond for the remainder of semester during via packets designed to demonstrate learning and the advancement toward mastery and their final product. So new students will get paired with someone. Usually if a student comes in expressing interest in the consciousness studies concentration, they'll get paired with me. And then in the semesters thereafter, they're given the option of who they would like to work with. And they don't always get their first choice, but often they do. All right. So bringing us now to the idea of concentrations, the GGI students are given the option to align themselves with either embodiment studies or consciousness studies. I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but maybe if there's time during the conversation, it's been very interesting because I've had a lot of students go, but wait, what's the difference between embodiment studies and consciousness studies? If aren't I an embodied consciousness? And there's a lot of debate and a lot of dialogue about, there's some students feeling like they should be, they shouldn't have to choose. Unfortunately, we do require that they have to choose. They don't have to have a concentration, but if they do want a concentration, they can't do both, unfortunately. So, all right.
Are you going to tell us what you mean by consciousness studies?
Yes, I'm going to do that right now. Thank you for asking.
Good.
So this is the time for I'm going to stop that share and do another share. I'm going to show you a video that I put together that I show all my students at each residency. And yeah, and this is where I think you'll get a better picture of what specifically means to do consciousness studies at Goddard College. And as you're watching, I'd be curious to hear afterwards what where your own interests and work fall in terms of the disciplines that we kind of clump together under the label of consciousness studies. So that would probably be good food for thought. All right. And full screen. All right. Somebody shout out if you either can't see or hear this, but it should be good to go.
It hasn't started yet.
Oops. So are you not seeing it?
No.
Oh, okay. Thank you for telling me that.
Sure.
All right. Let's start over. Share screen. Doing consciousness studies. So you could not see it, basically.
Something flashed on it when you went to start over, though.
Okay.
I saw your
Try
face.
it again. Yeah. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Now let's see if I do that, if it messes everything up. Are we still good?
I can see it.
Can you hear it?
Not yet.
Ah. That's so strange because I did do share sound, I swear. Share screen. I'm going to uncheck share sound. Optimize for a video clip. And I will, maybe this time I will.
Hi there, and welcome
How's
to
that?
the introduction
Yay!
to the Consciousness Studies concentration here at Goddard College. I'm Hillary Webb, the Consciousness Studies Concentration Coordinator at GGI. And this lecture, I will be talking a little bit about what it means to do consciousness studies at Goddard College. So I've got a slideshow prepared and we'll just dive in. So in this video, I'll be discussing the core concepts and learning areas in the study of consciousness, or put more simply, the 4 domains by which we can approach the study of consciousness. I'll be discussing the importance of defining consciousness for yourself in order to ground the specific research that you yourself do. And I'll give you my own loose definition, how I come at consciousness. We'll look at the current concentration requirements, or basically what will be expected of you as a consciousness studies student here at GGI. And I'll give you some of my thoughts about the value of developing a consciousness studies community. Then after the video is complete, we can proceed with questions and discussions. And this, of course, is always my favorite part because we get to talk about our own work and what excites us about this very mysterious, wonderful, and exciting field of study. So let's get into it. Before we dive into the topic of how we study consciousness, let's talk about why we study consciousness. That is, when studying the mystery of consciousness, what is it that we want to know? What are we trying to uncover in our research? So, as I've said here up on the screen, speaking very generally, what we might want to know is, what it does, and what it, quote unquote, super does. And I will briefly explain what I mean by each of these. So the what it is. By this, I mean, what is the ultimate nature of consciousness? What is the thing that it is ultimately reducible to? Now, historically, the thought around this is generally being split into 3 distinct camps. There is the materialist perspective, which argues that matter is the only true substance and that consciousness is a byproduct of physiochemical processes. In contrast to this, you've got subjective idealism, which takes the position that mind is primary, with matter believed to be an illusion created by the mind. And then finally, we have the dualist perspective, which suggests that mind and body are 2 equally real and irreducible substances that somehow link up, even if we don't know how. And so for many researchers, this question of the ultimate nature of consciousness is a central quest. And what it does, in addition to seeking insight into its ultimate nature, researchers in the field of consciousness studies may also want to know, what does consciousness do? So that is, how does it function to support the individual's existence? Or in some cases, how does it seemingly act self-destructively against the individual's apparent best interests? Along with this, we might ask, how do individuals and/or particular cultures understand the nature of consciousness, and what does this understanding lead to in terms of making meaning of their experiences as beings in the world? Now, then the final one is what it super does. And so this, for me, is sort of pointing at the question of its potential. What is human consciousness capable of beyond our current understanding of it, and or beyond what we're able to measure? So, for example, this might include the study of anomalous experiences such as psychic phenomenon, non-ordinary healing powers, the continuation of consciousness beyond death, and so on and so forth. So here at Goddard, we tend to split the study of consciousness into 4 overlapping fields of research that you'll see diagrammed here. We've got the scientific, the philosophical, the social scientific, and the arts and humanities. Now, of course, this list isn't totally exhaustive, but I do think it gives at least a pretty good starting point for the ways in which those of us involved in the study of consciousness can kind of get at the questions of what consciousness is, what it does, and what it super does. And of course, each field has its own emphasis on which question it is most interested in illuminating. I'll go through these 4 fields one by one, but just to say again that while these are their own distinct fields, they're not entirely separate from one another, as you'll see by the way they overlap and interlink. So we'll start with the scientific. So here we have the scientific domain. Specific fields within this domain include neuroscience, biology, cognitive science, etc. Consciousness is studied empirically typically in this domain, using quantitative methodologies that focuses on observation and on repeated and repeatable testing. And if you are a consciousness studies concentration student and you gravitate towards this particular domain, lots you could get into, but you might, for example, decide to design a study such as, what does EEG research tell us about the usefulness or non-usefulness of binaural beats as a brainwave entrainment tool, just as one example. Then we have the philosophical domain. And in contrast to the scientific domain, the philosophical study of consciousness tends to be based around logical arguments as opposed to verifiable, repeatable experiments. In a way, they tend to be framed as sort of like thought experiments about what consciousness is, does, and superdoes. Fields falling within this category include philosophy of mind, religion and spirituality, metaphysics, etc. If somebody wanted to study consciousness from the philosophical domain, they might ask a research question, such as what I did when I was a master's student at Goddard, which was, how do certain spiritual, philosophical, and psychological systems envision the opposites of existence as being complementary rather than antagonistic? And what can this teach us about the experience of undergoing major shifts in consciousness, both as individuals and as societies? Here we have the social scientific domain, in which the focus tends to be on humanistic concerns, such as the intersection of consciousness, culture, and personal identity. Fields within this domain include psychology, sociology, anthropology, and so on. And they tend to ask questions, about how individuals and groups navigate and make meaning of the world, based on their particular understanding of what consciousness is, does, and superdoes. A consciousness concentration student might design a research study around a question such as, for example, how do members of a particular cultural group understand the ultimate nature of consciousness? And how does this understanding shape the way they make meaning of the world, approach problems of existence, relate to one another, and so on and so forth. So finally, we have the study of consciousness, looking at it through the domain of the arts and humanities. And this is a really exciting domain, and one that I'd really like to see more consciousness studies students dive into. The arts and humanities domain is primarily concerned with the creative and imaginative expressions of consciousness. How do human beings express their understanding of what consciousness is, does, and superdoes through forms of creative expression, such as music, visual arts, literature, film, theater, etc. This domain is also a chance for students to unleash their own creative expression and use their own art practices as a means of exploring consciousness. And, in addition to perhaps doing some sort of art project that transmits and translates some of your own relationship to consciousness through some sort of art, a student might also do a process paper, let's say, that might ask the question, for example, how are dreams, visions, hallucinations, and so on represented in literature, art, music, theater, etc. So, yeah, personally, I'd love to see somebody do a thesis on how consciousness and theories of consciousness are portrayed in the science fiction genre. That's my wish. Anyway, very open to possibilities, and I find this one particularly exciting, especially I feel it's very underutilized at Goddard, and I'd love to see more students take advantage of the opportunities within studying consciousness in this particular domain. All right. So defining consciousness. So it's been said that the human mind is the only thing in existence trying to understand itself, which kind of in some ways makes our attempts at studying consciousness a little like a dog chasing its own tail. Speaking for myself, I don't expect we will ever have an absolute definition of what consciousness is, does, or superdoes, but I do believe that it's very important for consciousness studies students and anyone aligning themselves with this particular field to formulate their own loose definition of consciousness, if only as a jumping off place and a way of being able to communicate the assumptions that are inherent within their own theories. Again, this definition should be loose and open enough to allow for revision as you develop new ideas, information, and experiences. So, for example, I'll give my own definition. Here's the definition I tend to use in my own work. Consciousness is the process by which the total sum of experience, information, knowledge, and understanding become available to us through states of ordinary and non-ordinary awareness. As human beings, we are in every moment experiencing and being transformed by the world through both ordinary and non-ordinary means, whether we are consciously aware of it or not. So, as you can see, in this definition, it reveals a lot about what my particular interest and research focus is all about. My focus is on the social scientific, specifically the anthropological lens of consciousness. So this definition is specifically geared toward showing my interest in both ordinary and not ordinary states of consciousness and how these various states influence and transform human beings' experiences of being a being in the world. As a consciousness researcher, I really urge you to take some time to come up with a good working definition. Again, one that's solid enough to ground your work and help you communicate it to others, but also loose enough that it can change as your understanding changes. And actually, if you work with me, it will likely be a requirement. Speaking of requirements, let's talk about the concentration requirements for being a consciousness studies student at Goddard. Basically, I'm recording this in the fall of 2022. So if you're watching this after that, be aware that things may change in terms of the requirements for graduation. So just make sure that you discuss with me or your advisor what the current expectations are. But speaking for the present moment, in order to successfully complete your studies here in GGI with a consciousness studies designation on your transcript, you will need to declare your intent to be a consciousness studies student by the end of your G1 semester, demonstrate an understanding of central concerns and questions across consciousness studies, demonstrate mastery of your chosen focus, develop an engaged practice, which means sharing your work with your community in some way, and that can be long-term or short-term, and you can discuss what this might look like with your advisor and with me and so forth. You will need to write an identity paper in which you reflect upon your personal professional relationship to the study of consciousness, and then finally complete a final product that touches on some area of the study of consciousness. Our consciousness studies community. So I always say one of Goddard's greatest gifts really is its community. And yeah, as a consciousness studies concentration student, I really urge you to take whatever opportunities you can over the next 4 semesters and beyond to get to know folks who share your passion for this subject matter, even if they come at it from a different or, slightly or significantly different perspective. In fact, I would say seek out people, especially if they come at it from a slightly or significantly different perspective. It's important for all of us, given that, consciousness is such a mystery and the definition of it is so dependent on where we are looking and what we're focusing on. It's definitely important to have open and respectful conversations with one another and allow your own perspective to be broadened and shaped as this goes on. And one of the outcomes of this is that you will find and develop strong allies in the field who can really be invaluable support to you and your research at Goddard and beyond. For example, in the future, you may decide to publish a paper or write a blog or something that has to do with your chosen field. And I always know it's wonderful to get a couple colleagues to read it before it goes out to say, what have I missed? what other ways of looking at it should I maybe consider as I'm developing my argument? All right. So that's the end of the slide lecture, and we will now move on to questions and discussion. And if there's anything you'd like to discuss after we wrap up at any point throughout the semester, please do feel free to get in touch with me at any point. Yeah, so thank you for your interest in the Consciousness Studies concentration here at Goddard Graduate Institute.
All right. So hopefully that answered some questions about kind of what consciousness studies looks like at Goddard and how we do that. Just going to make sure, okay, do a quick finish of the presentation that I was showing before. Okay, are you seeing the, yeah, oh, thank you so much for being my thumbs up friend there. Thank you. Oops. Yeah. Okay, so I just thought it'd be fun to kind of buzz through a few titles of final products that some of the consciousness studies students have done, just because I find it very inspiring, and just I'm always just overwhelmed with gratitude and enthusiasm for the interesting lenses through which our students kind of come at whatever it is that they're studying, and the way they really bring subject matters that I would never have thought to associate together, and in some cases things I never would have thought would fit into a consciousness studies framework, but it does. So for example, a recent student doing a paper called Accessing Consciousness Through Hip Hop, and designing a website that shows the history of hip hop through the lens of consciousness studies. I mean, never would have thought of that. So exciting. This one was mine, Paradox and the Reconciliation of Opposites. Where we have American Herbalism and the Transformative Power of Everyday Sacred Plants. Another really cool one talking about, we may think of sacred plants as ones that have a real psychedelic effect, but what about the quieter psychedelic plant, or the quieter sacred plants like a dandelion that have transformative effects too, but they're not as sort of like blow the top of your brain off. How do we engage with plants at that level? From word to world, a grimoire for the integration of divinatory consciousness. Essentially, a student that looked at divination, specifically the tarot, and said, and had this whole sort of metaphysical model of how divination shows us that the universe works on a combination of chance, fate, and grace. And actually use tarot as part of his methodology, and in terms of like designing his final product, and helping himself answer questions that were not easily accessible to the front part of his consciousness. And then most recently, I'm having a student graduate this semester who did a whole beautiful study interviewing people who use mindfulness in the workplace, and looking at what does it mean to be mindful in the workplace? How do you set up the situations where one can be mindful for oneself, and also bring it to other people to encourage mindfulness and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's that for that. All right. So yeah, I think we have, what are we at? We've got like 35 minutes or something like that, or however much time we want to take. If you all are up for it, I don't know, I won't call on anybody per se, because you shouldn't have to talk if you don't want to talk. I totally respect that. But I would love to hear from you all about any questions you have, any impressions, any suggestions. I'm always looking to, make this really fertile and vibrant program. So as I'm somewhat new to being the concentration head, I'm eager for people who have, been in the field. So anybody
Thank you very much, first of all, Hillary, for this presentation. It's very interesting to hear how this consciousness studies are formalized in an academic setting. Is kind of something that's a little bit foreign to me. I mean, I think all of us bring it into our topics, into our subjects, but to actually create that into a major is something really interesting. We did have a couple of questions from Tiffany in the chat. So I don't know if you've seen those.
No.
First one is, no one's done a paper on HAL, from 2001. And the second one asking if the hip hop website is still running.
Now, she wasn't able to, in the 2-year time frame, she wasn't able, as far as I know, to create the website. She may have done that since she graduated, I don't know. But what she did instead was write a paper about some of the ideas that would go into the website, and then also kind of like a what would you call it, like kind of like a mind map about what the website would look like and how it would hook in, and this to this, this to this. Yeah.
And nothing on HAL?
Nobody.
How is that possible?
I mean, especially with all the talk of AI.
Right? Oh my
So
God.
can I count on you to enroll and do my fantasy paper?
That like I could see that happening. You never know.
Yeah, it's funny. I just rewatched 2010 like 3 days ago, and I'm like, God, this is good.
Right? And like the books and like
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But the beginning of the Barbie movie had a strong 2001 tie-in, and young people had to have that whole thing explained to them
Yeah.
to get it. So
Yeah.
that's 60 years ago now, 2001.
Yeah.
So there's part of the reason is that people don't even know it exists anymore.
Right.
Sad but true.
Which is too
That's
bad, because that is a
shameful.
classic, and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Marjorie, yeah. Oh, can't hear you. I think you might have your mute on. Marjorie?
Margie? We can't hear you.
Okay, well, good. Now
Yeah.
you can hear me.
Yes.
Sorry, one question is just to run that by me again. Question: you were talking about the grimoire for integration of divinatory consciousness, and I was curious, first of all, of the word grimoire, but also secondly, you did 3 words that were embodying that paper. That included, one of the words was grace. So can you just say that again? You said it very quickly.
Sure. Hopefully I get it right too. And essentially that divination gives a model for the universe as working on chance, fate, and grace.
Okay,
Now,
so that was it.
Here's a pitch. So my student, Ivan Greenberg, recently published an article in an Anthropology of Consciousness journal that is a mini version of his work. And it was, I believe, in the last issue. So I highly recommend that everybody read that and follow his work. And I'm really hoping that he'll publish his dissertation at some point, because it was just so well done. And I'm extraordinarily proud of him.
What was the name again?
My next question, though, is a little harder, and if I may, I have 2. And that is, if you could perhaps connect your earlier Peruvian shamanic studies with what you're now doing with the theater and performing arts studies, and whether you can kind of help us through the ways some of those connections have been made for you as you deepen and kind of go in different directions.
Sure. Actually, John and I were just talking about this before you all showed up. So this is very new research for me, so I'm not entirely sure the exact direction, but I'm very interested in dialectical processes. And so, how do 2 seemingly opposing things create a third thing that's bigger and better and more has the potential for creative growth and just a better world, let's say. And one of the things I'm somebody whose life I would say my brain has been changed by attending live theater. I would say, thinking about the things that have been most profoundly changed the way I think about the world. I came up with about 7 instances of a live theater or live performance experience. So the work that I am entering into now looks at what is that dialectical relationship, energetic exchange between the theater artist on the stage or behind the scenes and the audience members. Like, what is happening in between us that creates the transformative process? And, there's a lot of different theories about that, from mirror neurons to, different spiritual concepts, the idea of rasa in the Indian world. So how it pertains to, for example, my work in Peru, where I did my doctoral research. In Peru, as I was looking at this concept of yanantin, which is complementary opposites, and kind of exploring how do you look at the world through, or how does looking at the world through the lens of existence as a dance of opposites, rather than the more Western philosophy of existence as a battle of opposites, shift our relationship to the world and each other. And in the process of doing this research, the shamans that I worked with outlined this 4-stage process that takes a relationship from one of antagonism to one of complementarity. And it's hard to articulate because I'm still sort of in the sort of that big phase with the beginning of research before you've kind of whittled it down to a manageable, articulatable, statement. But I'm noticing very much this pattern of encounter where we go from the moment of seeing another human, let's say, whether that's right in front of us or on the stage, and having this very brief moment where we have no projection, we have no judgment. It just is as it is. And it's that sort of holy moment that lasts a split second, let's say. And then, of course, things start to happen and there's that confrontation, and that can be good or bad. Lovemaking is a confrontation, arguing is a confrontation. Watching somebody unfold and having these feelings and, wait, what did he say? And I don't get it. And let me see what's happening here. And that guy reminds me of a guy I dated. I don't like him at all. Now that guy, I would totally, whatever, however you want to think about those interactions, until you finally get to a place where you're in the moment with somebody. Those sort of I thou has been dissolved, and it's sort of this moment of complete complementarity where everyone is just as they are and things are happening and transforming. And then, the final stage being where everybody walks away having ingested the presence of the other and are different because of that. Whew. Did that make any sense at all?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Good thing
Yeah.
we recorded that. Now you can go back and remember what it is you're
No,
going to study.
now I can go back and go, I said, what? So yeah, so I'm very interested in the work that John referred to that I did earlier. Was a look, my last research project, which turned into a book, was about looking at the concept of communitas, or collective joy, in the context of this stand-up comedy club in Berlin, which was actually an international English speaking, not too many Germans were there, that considered itself the friendliest comedy club in Europe. And so I did this really fun study on what do these guys do to create a sense of communitas and joy and lack of judgment and all that. Yes, Marjorie.
Can I have one more sentence here, because I just did click on something. One of my most incredible moments in the theater was in Sakha Republic in Yakutsk, land of Siberian shamans, etc. And in a moment of total joy in that theater, at the end of an incredibly cathartic performance about repression of, among other things, shamans, there was a kind of spontaneous outburst of people jumping up. I'd never seen a theater look like that in my whole life. People were going wild in what was really a communal ecstasy. And my friend and co-author, who's Sakha intellectual and has created a lot of their laws, looked at me and said, that was an egregor moment. And she had to teach me the Greek word egregor. Okay, so this is my co-partner thinker who has taught me very, very much. She doesn't just give me data. She's a synergistic partner. And when I thought about that communitas moment of egregor solidarity and what that meant for the people in that room who were building a Saha identity through theater, it made me completely change part of what I had been talking about and thinking about in terms of how Saha are building up a kind of benevolent, prideful, non-chauvinist sense of cultural nationalism.
Wow.
And this is really important to me because I'm trying to think of other cases for that kind of egregor moment, and it sounds like you've been along some of those same lines.
Yeah. Is there research? Did somebody write this up or?
Oh,
is
I've
there-
written it up. It's in my newest book, Galvanizing Nostalgia, ? Indigeneity and Sovereignty in Siberia.
So
Cornell Press.
galvanizing
Galvanizing Nostalgia ? Indigeneity and Sovereignty in Siberia.
Oh, it's so funny. I'm reading this book called Observing Theater, and the first chapter is on nostalgia and theater. So I will totally look up your
Okay.
book because this will be really helpful.
That's
Yeah.
great.
And I love
I'm
that-
sorry it's not online for free. I kind of wish it were.
No,
but
that's okay.
Cornell is not like that.
No, I'm
Okay.
happy to
Enough of that.
support. And I like that you used the word egregor, because actually in the book that I wrote about the Berlin work, I talk about it's sort of a first person thing. And I'm like, what is going on here? Some sort of egregor that's trying to spring to life. So I like that word is somebody else is using that word too. Did somebody else have a question in the chat?
I just posted a link to UW. I'm at University of Washington. They're putting on the thick description of Henry Miller Volume 1 coming up, and I was like, oh, what is this going on? And just kind of, it was curious
cool.
timing because it kind of
Nice.
applies to some of the stuff I'm doing. I'm like, oh, this is going to be interesting to see.
I'm copying that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Does anyone have something you'd like to help Hillary as far as how you might approach the teaching of consciousness in your own careers or in your own classes?
And or getting the word out about the program. That's another. That's
Oh,
a
yeah,
big
you're
one
the
these
director.
days.
Yeah, you got to do that.
Yeah, and yeah. And yeah, we go from big numbers to small numbers sometimes in the consciousness, which is fine. But I do really feel that this is something. I mean, I know when I first was looking for master's programs, and I probably Googled consciousness studies, finding nothing but Goddard and maybe a couple other. I was like overjoyed because it's my thing. So finding other students who are yearning for this kind of thing.
Well, what I can say from my own experience is, teaching at a community college is I had an elective course that I taught called Magic, Witchcraft, and Religion. And so the centerpieces of those classes, the evenings or the lectures where it all kind of came together were all consciousness based. So I had one night where I gave a definition of normal consciousness as I understand it. We use a very explicitly evolutionary perspective. So it's all about, being able to interact successfully with the external world as far as, finding food and mates and avoiding becoming food. And so there's like how can I say, a certain really reality check based. And then on another night, I could talk about disruptions of that when it was altered states of consciousness. And that talks about drugs, talks about shamanism, talks about religious ecstasy and things like that. And from what my students told me, they had never heard most of this stuff, or even, there were a few that had, let's say, various experiences with psychoactive component or constituents and things like that, and approached it from that perspective. But to hear it articulated in a way that, like, this is a serious field of study for anthropologists and psychologists and neuroscientists and others, was very eye-opening to them, because it legitimized many of their own experiences. And it provided them also, though, with a way of looking at these experiences that was, broader and therefore I think a little more like, let's say, cultural relativizing than just the way we tend to in mainstream culture, where these are the knowledge you gain there is not important, or it's an illusion, or it's secondary, or whatever. And so I think the young people especially are very interested in this. They just might not even know such a thing exists, or if it does, how it's packaged, you know, in conceptual and linguistic terms.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I should think about doing more sort of topic specific talks
Mm.
throughout the semester, not just to the Goddard students, but maybe making them available to, you know, anybody who's interested who then wants to, you know, follow a similar.
I could see you also, Hillary, maybe doing like 15-20 minute long little presentations on your research as it relates to Goddard, and creating a YouTube channel.
Mm,
So these are the kind of things that you've done, and maybe you can get that hip hop student and some of the others to do similar little
ooh,
15,
yeah.
20-minute like things. I have a student who just went to the some kind of, I can't remember exactly, some kind of honors program at UCLA. They only take a few students, and some of them turn out like YouTube videos, or they'll make songs, or they'll do all this, and they post it on the web. And that's how the new students can see what the old students have been doing. That's
Fantastic
really,
idea.
yeah.
I love that. I love the, or even, you know, if they're reluctant to do a video, having just a 15-minute interview with each, you know, some of my past students, and say, you know, what did
Yeah.
you do and what, yeah, I love that.
There you go.
Talk even. Yeah, I in undergrad I double majored in interdisciplinary visual art as well. And there's so many art students, and since art is one of the focuses of consciousness, I know that's art is a big part of my research as well. But I know there's so many art students that are looking at options that aren't necessarily going to like art history for grad school. Um, you know, because that's like a terminal degree is like our history, but they don't want to do that, and they still want to continue on, but there's nothing that is like art related, and they're kind of struggling to find something. I could see that would be a really valuable transition for artists that are looking for something more. And you know, art schools I think would be a great place to like kind of share your research. I mean, we were looking at Donna Haraway in undergrad as like a basis for a lot of um our art projects. We took like a whole semester of like Same with the Trouble to do like tentacular being projects. So I mean, I could see that as like a something to like use some of your research as a basis for, and then maybe that would be like, oh, you know, and if you're looking at a master's degree, think about going to
Yeah,
college. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, I actually recently, a couple semesters ago, was asked to kind of hop programs, and I worked with an MFA student at Goddard who is a painter, but she really wanted to explore the connection between her paintings and quantum entanglement.
Okay.
Yeah, that was cool. And it was so interesting for me. Yeah, being able to, and this is why I wish there were more art students in my program, because it is this opportunity to dive into consciousness in a way that is so experiential and so, just to me, so interesting, because you don't see a lot of it.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think they're going to need a program such as yours, because I can't imagine too many mainstream universities are going to have professors. Oh yeah, that's something I could totally advise you on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's in that sense, you're more of a catalyst perhaps than an advisor, you know,
Mhm.
by kind of facilitating, pointing them in different directions. I like that, Hillary.
Right. Yeah. I'm also, you know, part of my role as an advisor is to be sometimes the first audience, because
Mhm.
I'm not always an expert in the exact thing, but I can help with the critical thinking. I can say, okay, you've just given me an argument that I'm not buying. I'm not saying I won't buy it, but you got to give me more. And you're not going to convince anybody if you just say believe it because I believe it. Um, so so it is fun for me to learn things that I don't know anything about, and have reflection, and to use my lack of knowledge about a thing to the benefit of the student, because they are going to be wanting to not necessarily talk to a scholarly audience, but be able to communicate their ideas to the general public.
Do we have any more comments or questions for Hillary? Well, should we wrap it up then? What do you think?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
I'm gonna-
Speaking of art, my artist husband has an opening in 45 minutes that I'm gonna try to get to the beginning of. So
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm gonna stop the recording then, so.